My name is Jacob Stoops.
And I'm Jeff Luella.
And you're listening to the Page 2 podcast.
This is our podcast about the people of the SEO industry.
We chronicle the real-life stories, experiences, challenges, and advice from some of the most amazing people in the business. In today's episode, we talk with Martha Van Berkel, CEO and co-founder of Schema App, a service that empowers the digital marketer to own their schema markup strategy through implementation without ever writing code or engaging with IT. We talk about her background in mathematics and engineering. She also attended the MIT Sloan School of Management. We also discuss how she spent almost 14 years at Cisco, what it's like to be an innovator at an otherwise slow-moving, highly bureaucratic company, the circumstances that led to her going out on her own and eventually forming her own company with her husband. In the news, we talk about Google's recent broad core algorithm update and share our thoughts on how the industry reacts to algo updates as well as our own approaches. And finally, we deep dive into structured data, how brands can use it, as well as what challenges SEOs face with schema and getting it implemented. So get your popcorn ready as we tell Martha's SEO story and have another great roundtable discussion. Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Stoops, and we are back with another episode of the Page 2 podcast. And I am here with Mr. Jeff Luella. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. And Jeff, before the call, what are you going to start calling me now?
Stoops.
Stoops, just Stoops.
See, I get in a little trouble because I call Jacob, but all his friends call him Jake, so he doesn't think I'm his friend. So I'm going up even higher than that and now calling him Stoops, which is the closest of closest.
It's the inner circle of my friends. If You've gotten to just calling me Stoops, you know you're in the circle of trust.
Yeah, so it was between that and J Money, but Stoops seemed a little better.
No. That's one thing that I'm putting on the do not call me list. And also, Jake from State Farm, do not call me that. I will. We will not be friends. Anyways, we are also joined by Martha Van Berkel. Martha, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today.
Thank you so much for joining us. And in case you don't know Martha is the CEO and co-founder of Schema App. And we are very, very excited to have her on. But before we kind of dive in, if you're a first-time listener, just want to explain the podcast a little bit. And I'll probably do this every single time because we're kind of a small niche podcast. And I'm sure that we have a lot of first-time listeners. So it's like a stool with three legs. The primary focus of our podcast is not a sheer knowledge dump. That is something that we feel like will be something that happens, but it's not the core focus. The core focus is to get into the backgrounds and the origin stories of SEOs, because we all come from, in many cases, really weird and unintentional places, and there's not necessarily in today's world a really easy way in the academic world to get into SEO. They do teach it somewhat, but not in the way that it needs to be taught. So often we come from other places. And not only that, I like to talk about and understand the day-to-day challenges, what it's like to be an SEO. And I've described this podcast as a couple of things. The origin stories of great SEOs, kind of like we're superheroes. And I've also described it as if you were a fly on the wall listening to two SEOs or three SEOs in this case talk to each other. This would be kind of what you would hear. The second leg of the stool, and this has been added in season 2, as we talk about the news. And it's mostly Jeff reading the news and me just yelling about things and complaining about things, which I enjoy. I'm not sure if the audience enjoys it or not. And the third leg of the stool is we do a deep dive into a predetermined subject. And today we're going to deep dive into schema markup and structured data and machines. And we're going to get deep on that because that is Martha's expertise. So we definitely want to make sure we we talk about that, and I know that we have a lot to say about that for sure. So stay tuned for that later on in the episode. So without further ado, Martha, where do you come from? Who are you? Tell us your story.
Who is this person that's on the call? Well, I'm Canadian is maybe the first start. So I'm originally a West Coaster. I grew up mostly in Vancouver, but I now live just outside Toronto in a city called Guelph. And so, yeah, if I say A or apologize or thank you for things, it's just my Canadian side popping out.
The nicest people on earth.
Very polite. A.
Except when we're talking about hockey, then we're less polite.
Cool. So, Martha, tell us about your background.
Sure. So my journey into SEO, I think, is a convoluted one in that, like, I had never any intention of ending up in this industry. And here I am, having a ton of fun. So my background is I studied mathematics and engineering, so applied math in school. So I also looked at mechanical engineering. I had dreams of becoming a doctor, and then I thought, I'll become an engineer that works in the medical field, and then just decided that I didn't want to do any of it. And when I graduated university, I got a job offer from Cisco Systems. So it was sort of the big tech boom. And Cisco actually invited me to move to California. So, Canadian, thinking of palm trees and sun and no snow, I moved to California. And what was really interesting was that I started in a role doing technical support, and, I did applied math at school. So the snob in me was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to move to do technical support? After I did this epic degree that's technology focused. But when I really thought about it, I got to help people and talk to people all day and solve problems all day. And that's actually the things I love to do. And so up and at it, I moved to California, bought myself a purple, new age looking Beetle, and started sort of working for Cisco. And I actually spent 14 years at Cisco, which I can't quite still believe that I was there that long. But after I started work in technical support, so for voice over IP, so when voice over IP was not really a cool thing yet, was when I was supporting that. And then what was really neat at Cisco is that I never applied for another job. I always sort of created a new role for myself. So whether it was taking on a project management role and then identifying a vulnerability for Cisco that the government was interested in, that then got me promoted to look at Cisco's 3 to 5 year strategy for automated support. I was 24 at the time, sort of building a $5 million initiative sort of for how they were going to have machines heal their networks. And I mentioned that because it's kind of not so different from what I do today. And then I basically helped build that organization. So we got the funding for that big initiative. And then we built an organization of about 230 people with developers. And my job was always kind of helping people buy into that vision, understand the change, uncomplicate the complicated things that we were doing. And then I led the product team. So I did quite a bit of product management at that time. So defining what we should build for who, going to talk to customers, helping them adopt those really early prototypes or early kind of versions of it. And sort of leading this team of product managers and program managers. And I got bored, which often happens because the challenges weren't good. And then I moved to some other roles working in Europe for early adoption. And then at this point, I took on a team that owned all the Cisco's online support tools. And so the online support tools at Cisco are the tools you use to look up bugs on Cisco products, or read release notes, or look at sort of event management of things that are failing. So it was sort of technical tools for troubleshooting, and kind of grew the product management discipline there. But what was really great was that this was my first understanding of how customers were interacting with, at that time, Cisco's brands, content, and trying to find answers. And it was really interesting because this is back in, I don't know, it must have been 2008, 2009, where we were no one's coming onto Cisco's website to search for the documentation or to use the on-site search. They're using this thing called Google to find answers. and none of our stuff was optimized. SEO wasn't even like, there was no one in our, like, we own the whole Cisco support website. Like, no one was really doing SEO. But it was my first sort of learning of like, oh, the customer behavior is different and they're using these other tools. How do we actually like start thinking about search? So that was probably like my first introduction to search, but we didn't really do anything with it because it, again, wasn't sort of like on the roadmap, which is like so crazy when you think of it now and how much money was spent sort of like trying to make on-site search work better. And then in 2013, I got pregnant, and at that point I was actually like really really ready for a change. So I was either going to have a baby or quit. So I had a baby, and in Canada you get a year off when you have a baby. So it's I took the year to basically be a mom, and at that time start kind of exploring what my husband was doing, which was like he was building products to help contractors be found online. And so I was like, oh, I should start like try and help you sell stuff, since that's something I've never done and would be fun to try out. And so lo and behold, I started selling kind of audit services and kind of a product that was supposed to be sort of giving coaching on SEO services. And little did I know that would then sort of like change my entire career.
Awesome.
So it's a bit of background before like we started Schema App, and then there's sort of like chapter 2 of like Martha post Cisco to where we ended up now. But I don't know if you have any questions or things before then.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, Cisco is like a gigantic company, right? So it's and kind of creating your own roles in that organization seems pretty challenging. Did you have any pushback like when you had an idea to create kind of that new role or that section there to?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I mean, how did you get adoption of what you were trying to do?
So I think I'm just really good with people, right? So like it all comes down to like finding champions. And the same goes in smaller organizations, or like if you're selling to a client, right? Or trying to get stuff done within a client. Like part of it's like building relationships so that one, they trust that you have the ability and the knowledge. And two, I think that they like believe that you can actually do it, and that they understand sort of what that impact will be, to the company or to their team or to the customer if you actually get that done. And so I would think I got really good at, getting people to get excited about that future state. And in fact, like that's pretty much what I do now, right? Like all I do now is get people excited about like how structured data is going to be this like data layer for how you're going to manage your brand's content, and how you can actually make sure all machines understand the context of what you do. And, I talk about like the news and how it applies to that, and how their like SERPs will change. Like, so I did the same thing with any other initiative or idea I had. And then I also found other people that were super excited about it. And so like this one project I did, probably like what I'm most proud of, is I opened up all of Cisco services APIs. So instead of us being able to, like, people were basically scraping our content to try to build products that could then recommend like products that need to be replaced. So it was like our release notes and our end of life kind of documentation. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like we should just give them this data, because if they have this data, they'll buy more product. And so I found like a couple other product managers, and then I found an IT manager who was kind of excited about it. And then like he found 2 analysts that were excited, and 2 developers. And then I found AT&T who wanted to be my pilot customer. And so we pretty much, like with my director's support, like did a pilot with AT&T and used AT&T to then influence leadership to like roll us into their product base. So I'm just like, maybe I'm just like a little bit conniving with regard, or like smart about how I sort of influence. And anytime like you can use the customer to do that, and find other people who are willing to make it happen, outside of their daily scope. So a lot of like my most fun projects were, pilots. I'm like the queen of the pilot. Like, oh, we'll just pilot that. Like we're not committing to anything. We're just going to pilot it. And so it's not like, I look back now at what I did at Cisco, and I'm like, well, of course I became an entrepreneur. Like I was doing entrepreneurial stuff, just with their money instead of my own.
Best way to do it.
Yeah. So it was wild.
That's great. So you're in Cisco, you're creating these, kind of blazing the path throughout at Cisco there. But then you decide to move on, or, you you get pregnant, you have your baby, take a year off, which is great. I wish states gave everyone a year off.
Yeah.
For that, I think we get 6 weeks.
I know.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the timeline there. In 2013, were you already back in? I would assume you were back in Canada at that.
Yeah, good question. So in 2004, like right before I launched that like giant like that basically company inside the company, like the 230 people, my my partner at the time was being relocated back to Canada, to Toronto, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go too. And his, like, both my boss's boss and his boss's boss signed off on it. And so it was one of those days where I like walked into a meeting on a Friday and I was like, hey Jim, like I'm moving back to Canada today. And he was like, what? So it's like my vice president. And I was like, yeah, you know, like your boss signed off on it. And he was like, oh my goodness, like how did that happen? And so I spent a lot of time on planes after that. So I was basically in California every other week for 2 years until they basically made a travel ban. But like Cisco was telepresence, WebEx, you know, company. And so like I've been using video and this type of platform for like communicating with people since like 2003, 2004. And so I was like, look, we'll just use the technology. And so I led a global team, you know, from Toronto while also being closer to my family here. So it was really great. I had 2 grandmothers over 90 and I didn't really know them because I hadn't lived in the same city as them growing up, and, you know, really got to know them sort of in their last like 3 to 5 years. And it was really a special, awesome time for me. At the same time, you know, I was able to kind of show that you can work from anywhere, lead a team from anywhere, and get things done. So it was a pretty wild time. So I was in Toronto from 2004 to 2014. And it was in 2012 that I like started getting grumpy. I was starting to actually be told not to do my pilot projects and to like stop being innovative, and that like they didn't want to really know what was going on with the teams and the customers. And to me, that was a red flag, because I was like, oh my goodness, like the whole value I add to this organization is being an innovator and helping do stuff for customers and, you know, moving quickly and agilely in this like really slow monolithic company. And so that was when I was like, I think I need to leave. I don't think I can be me, and I'm not going to change. Like, I'm not going to just shut up and sort of like be told what I'm going to get done, or kind of be told that like, we don't need to know what the customers are saying. 'Cause to me, that was core to the Cisco that like I was a part of. And, you know, since then I've left and lots of people have left. They've changed CEOs, like they're a totally different company now. But for me, it was sort of the writing was on the wall, but it was like a bad breakup though, because like I loved Cisco. Like I literally grew up there. Like I started there when I was like 21, 22. And I left in my mid-30s, and it was, you know, like they saw me getting married, they saw me, you know, like buying my first house. Like I had imagined that I would be there for life. And so when I didn't go back, so I didn't go back after my mat leave. I actually got laid off. It was brilliant. I was really sad because I felt like, you know, I had sort of left my family behind. But the good news is that, and this is actually usually what I say about the SEO community, is that like I've been just like so blessed to have like the SEO community embrace me as sort of like a newbie and someone who's come from a different background, like into this like new community and new family. And that's like the last, I don't know how many years it's been, 6 years. Holy smokes, it's been 6 years. Last 6 years, like to kind of journey through that's been really cool.
So it sounds absurd to me that they would not want to understand their customers, but like their customers better. It just really sounds absurd. And then it also sounds absurd that they would wait until you're back from your leave to then lay you off. That's just sounds like they did you a little bit dirty, unfortunately. And
actually, they totally did me a favor, and I'm just like totally grateful that they laid me off, because they gave me some money, which then funded my company. And at that point, like I was sort of done. So I don't know, like I think it's all just perspective. Like, you know, in big companies, there's lots of politics, right? And people have different motivations for doing things. And so like I had 12 like amazing years at Cisco where I was just like literally able to kind of do what I want and sort of like, you know, spend their money to build cool things for people. And so I sort of like, I was sad at the time, actually I was more sad like in those 2 years where I just felt like I was being squashed. At the end, I was like, hey, I kind of got what I wanted because I didn't really want to go back. And it like opened up this new chapter in my life. And for me, like I'm a glass half full kind of person. So I was like, all right, let's see what we can do here. But
So
like way scarier.
Yeah, that's what, and when I've thought of founding my own business, it has always been kind of too scary of a jump for me.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
you thought about that too, and maybe had the same thoughts, but like,
Well, just don't do it like with your husband or wife, and then don't do it while you're having babies, and after you've taken a year off and didn't make money for a year. Like that would be basically the like wrong time to start a business, which is exactly when we decided to start Schema App.
So tell us why did you decide then to start a business, and what did make you make that leap, and how is this kind of most recent chapter going for you?
Sure. So I kind of feel like I fell into this kind of my mistake. So I started the business with my husband, Mark Van Berkel, who is a semantic technologist. And so when we were, right after we were married, around the time we were getting married, he had just finished his MBA. He'd already has a master's in semantic technology and in engineering, like in development. And I was like, you should just quit your job and like, do what you really are excited about, which was like seeing if this semantic technology stuff he learned in like 2003, 2004, 2005, like actually had an application in the real world. And I'm like an adventurer. So I'm like, just do it. Like I can pay the bills. Ha 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 ha. So he did that. But because he's a developer, like he was really focused on the technology side. And that's why when I was on mat leave, I was like, hey, you've built some stuff and like we've spent all this money, but like, does anyone want to buy it? And I'd always been told at Cisco like that I should have been in sales, and I had never done sales. So this seemed like a great opportunity for me to try to do sales. So I'll never forget, like my daughter is like 2 months old. My husband's looking after her. I'm like locked in the room doing my first types of cold calls. And I was calling contractors and small businesses within Guelph where we live to say like, hey, would you like to learn more about like how we can improve your online presence? We built this product. So Market built this product that sort of like sent a weekly task or a monthly task that was like something you could do and follow instructions for to do like one thing in SEO. So set up your Google My Business, or write a blog about a question that your customers are asking, or like so it was like all these sort of like very discrete kind of time bound tasks that we had simplified. But the first thing I sold was an audit for $30. And it was so funny because like I think back, I was like, $30? Like my time on the phone was probably worth $30. But like I hadn't sold anything. So I was just trying to get like someone to pay me money to do something. So we did like this one-page SEO audit, and then we got people subscribed to this service, like this product where we sent task recommendations. But after about 6 months, they were all calling us and they're like, can you just do the tasks? And so like lo and behold, we were trying to build a product business. But at the same time, we ended up building a services business and ended up doing, pretty much like the consulting for those small and medium businesses. And around the same time, from my engineering university, like there was just a ton of CEOs and entrepreneurs amongst this group of people. We were fundraising for the university, and one of them like headed up one of the big pizza chains. And I was like, hey, you guys like aren't, doing a couple of things in SEO, and specifically at that point, like we called it semantic search. Like you're not doing semantic search. Do you want to learn about it? And so we sort of talked to their IT and technology team and ended up becoming their like SEO agency of record. So here we're like a 2-person company. It's like one of Canada's biggest pizza chains. And they basically like their business kept us alive. And all the while we were doing this, we were also doing Schema Markup. So now we're into like 2014, and Mark is like, oh, this whole Schema Markup structured data stuff is interesting. I'm trying to do it for these SMB clients, but because they're only paying us, at this point, they were paying us like $30 a month to do these tasks. And then we were charging them like $100 a month to do the work. Like we weren't making any money. It was like, he's like, I can build a tool that produces a Schema Markup. And by the way, they don't even know what that is, but like, I can see like this intersection of semantic technology with SEO. And he was just like loving this. And at the same time, like, I'm just literally like doing the work, trying to sell stuff, building relationships with people. And, he built the first kind of version of Schema App in 2014, and we were producing JSON LD. And I'll never forget, he went to like a Semantic tech conference where he met Aaron Bradley for the first time. Aaron Bradley's from Electronic Arts, another great like semantic technologist. And they're like, wow, that's like really cool what you built, but like too bad Google doesn't support JSON LD. And it wasn't until August 2015 that Google announced that they were going to support JSON LD. And so I'll never forget. And at this point, like we'd had our second child. So like we look at our revenue, and like the days I wasn't out like talking to people, like our revenue dropped, but we still like were barely getting by, like paying our bills and having food. Like there was like no awesome shiny like, hey, we're successful entrepreneurs. We're like, oh my gosh, this sucks. And and at this point, like I'd become an SEO person because like we had to get work done, we had to answer questions. And so I'll never forget, it was like September 12th, 2015. And Mark and I like looked at each other and we're like, why did we quit our well-paying jobs to like do this? Like, how did we become an SEO agency by accident? Like our whole goal was to build a product. And when we looked back on it, like the stuff Mark was really passionate about was like the semantic technology and the structured data stuff that we'd done. And at this point, like I'd been pitching Schema Markup and structured data like 2015, like to big companies all across Toronto. Like no one like was like, what are you talking about, Martha? Like this doesn't make any sense. But we decided like that night on the 12th, and actually Hunch Manifest, if you go to like our actual company name, you'll see like what we rewrote our website to. It like grossly needs updated now. But it's like, we are going to be a semantic search marketing company, and we are going to, by the end of 2015, try to fire all of our SEO clients, except for like maybe one or two that are strategic. And we are just going to like focus on, getting Schema App out there and getting this done. So we still were operating under Hunch Manifest. I think in sort of like October, Mark bought the domain Schema App one night at like 11 o'clock, didn't even talk to me about names or anything, just like bought it. And we put our beta out there for people to try. And it sort of allowed you to do proper connected schema markup. So it's a generator, but it allows you to like save the data, add relationships between things, kind of view the relationships in different ways. And we like basically got the first person to pay us for Schema App in, I think it was like March 2016. And so at that point we're like, oh my gosh, someone's like paying us for a product, doing something we love. This is amazing. But like no one cared about Schema Markup back in 2015, right? Like, we were just like way ahead of the market.
I cared in 2015.
Thank you. I'm so glad.
I know Jeff cared too.
Yeah, Jeff, I think we talked in 2016, right? So like that's when, like I would say like the innovators and the really thought forward people were starting to do it, but like the general public like was just like looking at me like I had three heads going, what are you talking about?
Yeah. We were looking for, and the way that I stumbled on Schema App was, we had that issue where some customers or clients can't ton of dev teams to implement things, or they just don't, the dev team's doing other things, and we couldn't get Schema in. And we're a huge analytics shop here, and I was using like Google Tag Manager or Adobe Tag Management at the time to be able to implement some things. And it was kind of a dirty way to do it, but when we did our test, it worked. And we're like, okay, so now this is working. Let's figure out, is this something we can scale? Again, I always push first. Let's get it into code and things like that. And then once we learned on that it worked through tag management, we kind of started looking out there, like what other tools out there can do this? And then we stumbled upon, me and Stu stumbled upon, Schema App. And we had a couple of calls with you. Unfortunately, that client went away that we were trying to get it implemented on and never used it at that point. But it was, so back then, like, what is it, 2016 or somewhere around there, 17. Yeah. And we were trying to really push Schema, and it's the basic ones in there. And we'll ask more Schema questions later on. But in general, it seemed like a great tool. And you were so impressive in all the sales process and talking that way that me and Stu still talk about it all the time. So.
And one thing I will say that we have completely glossed over that you all as listeners should know about Martha is she is way smarter than we are. She went to MIT which then makes us basically unqualified, almost unqualified to talk to her in terms of our.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Almost
You know what's
starting
so
a
funny though is like
business.
I feel dumb about like general SEO stuff, right? Because I haven't been a like generalist in SEO since like 2014, 2015, right? So I'm always like super humbled by like I know a lot and really deep in the structured data space, but I don't, you know, I know enough to be dangerous around like website architecture and data movement just because I've been doing all of that for a long time. But I'm always like I go to conferences and I'm like I don't know half this stuff. Oh my goodness.
And that's funny. And I'm being facetious for sure, just joking around. But yeah, it's quite amazing if somebody and we talk about imposter syndrome all the time.
Totally, I get that all the time.
That goes to MIT can have imposter syndrome. Then for the rest of us, it's pretty normal to have imposter syndrome as well. But one thing, Jeff, you kind of underscored it. It's a massive problem that we have, and I know I've been dealing with it for quite some time. And it's not imposter syndrome; it is implementation.
Implementation syndrome.
Implementation syndrome. The difficulty of getting things implemented, and we were talking a little bit before this about some challenges that we're kind of going through. And one of the things is like I can overcome a lot of things, but I can't overcome at this point if you won't implement as a client or as an internal team. It's really hard for an SEO to overcome lack of implementation. And I think that that's one of the great things about Schema App is that it helps us get creative and it helps you guys help your clients get creative in terms of trying to figure out how to work around implementation and timeline challenges. And that's kind of a critically important thing.
So it's interesting, Jake or Stoops, that you mentioned that.
There we go.
Because like the whole reason we want SEOs to be agile and be able to get shit done is because I got so tired of waiting at Cisco. So like that whole pain point of me being like, oh my gosh, like I can't do the things I love. You want me to like slow down. You don't want me to try. It was like me just being like super impatient, right? Like I'm just like, oh my goodness, can we actually just do something? Like, can we stop talking about it? Like, it's not okay that there were like 2 years delayed and $2 million over budget. Like it's not okay. And so I think part of that, like absolute impatience, like get pissed off, like get stuff done, is partly why we design the Schema App this way, is because like Mark and I have both like lived and breathed and like rotted to our core, like waiting for people to just like do something. And so, you know, I even get a bit cheeky, like in my sales process where I'm like, they're like, well, you know, we're going to think about it. It's like, oh, well, like when you decide that you want to be found in search, like through rich results, like just give me a call and, you know, we'll get it done within like 2 weeks. Like it'll just be done. And, you know, and people are like, wow, Martha, like you're sassy. I was like, yeah, because like, I know you're not going to do it, right? Like, I know you're just going to sit and talk about it for like 2 weeks. And in that time, like we could just actually get it done. So like, that's the part that I think is really fun when we find like the right champion. And then all of a sudden, like we've made the SEO the hero or like the agency the hero because like they can just get stuff done. Like we've removed those barriers to where like you're not just sitting around eating bonbons, like you actually get to do the stuff that you're talking about and that you're excited about.
Yeah, that is a breath of fresh air for sure. And I do love the slogan, making the SEO the hero. That resonates with me.
Right? Because like how often are we like talking about all these amazing strategies? We do all that work and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we'll consider that for next year's planning. And it's like February, right? And you're just like, oh my goodness, like seriously. And so, you know, our whole idea is like, you can be agile, like even in a large organization. So like SAP is one of our clients, you know, like we help that team be super agile within like a really large organization. And that's the part where like I get to be super excited because like I was in that organization and I was that slow moving slug, you know, and now, you know, we get to sort of like be like, take that and sort of like throw the whole thing on its head.
So you had talked a little bit about kind of being at the point of just kind of scraping by, at what point do you guys feel like you kind of turn the corner with Schema App and from business standpoint, and kind of what does that do for you in terms of alleviating the pressures that brings?
Yeah, so probably only recently, like in the last year or so. So in 2018, we released our highlighter. So it's sort of like being able to do stuff at scale. We also can like do data feeds, but like our highlighter really started getting people excited about the fact that like you could now optimize like a page template and do that at scale, literally like within minutes. And so we started getting some clients who were bigger, who would pay us upfront or like pay us larger amounts on a monthly basis, to where Mark and I could hire people. So like the first step was like, can we stop just having to work like endlessly and hire some people? So that was 2017, 2018, where we like started hiring people and started getting those clients on board. And then in 2019, we're at a point now where like we have the right team. So Schema App's like just at 19 people now. But like we've doubled in size every year. And so I would say like probably in the last year, it helps that like Google is now saying like do structured data. Like if you're not doing it, like start doing it. And I joke that like 2020 is like, I think finally the year of Schema Markup. Like I've been saying it's going to be the year of Schema Markup since like 2017. So it's like, I think this year it actually might be to where like every article that came out of Search Engine Journal or like, predictions around local was like structured data is like one of those top 10 strategies to do this year. And that's refreshing, both from a like, okay, I think like we'll be able to pay our bills and like continue to grow the company, because we haven't taken any outside money, like any VC money to build Schema. So we've like totally built it on customer revenue, which allows us then the flexibility to do what our customers need us to do, right? So like nobody's our boss. No one tells us we have to do it just to grow fast. Like we get to build the stuff that's the right thing for our customers. And then the market's right. So like I don't, people call us now, right? And so that's been a really big shift, I would say, since 2019. And like, I can buy new clothes, which is awesome.
The important things. That's nice to have it turned around to where you don't have to feel like you have to be chasing it all the time. And I definitely commend you, because you're doing all of this while raising a young family. And I'm right in that right now, where I've got 3 kids, 6 and under, and 1 8 months. So like,
wow.
I can't even.
It's busy, right?
Yeah, it's so busy, and I can't even imagine having to run a business on top of that. So I definitely commend you for sure.
Yeah, and try to get a market to care, right? Like, please care about structured data.
Yes, please. So I want to move on to news, and then I want to dive even deeper into.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So Jeff, what is in the news? I think we've got something today.
Oh yeah. So Google has announced their January 2020 core update. Seems like they're doing them quarterly. At least it has been for the last three or four, which is kind of good to know that if they're going to be on a schedule. From what I have understood, there's still too early to tell. It just was released a couple days ago, but seems like fintech was one of those areas that saw the boost. Well, I guess if you were doing it well, you saw the boost. I out of all my clients, I do have one that's actually a fast food restaurant that I thought maybe because they kind of sponsored the college championship game, LSU game. They were one of the sponsors there. I thought maybe that was the big boost I saw on Monday, but it's continuing today, and it's actually like 30% higher today than it was yesterday. So I have fingers crossed that it was from this update, even though I saw like most channels were up with those. It wasn't just SEO. But they didn't actually launch anything new. So since that update's come out, it seems like they've been up there. So we still don't know exactly what it is. I mean, Google always says, hey, it's, we want to make sure that we're not having thin content, spammy content, all the good SEO stuff out there. But I didn't know, Jacob, if you ever saw anyone, or Stoops, got to start calling you Stoops. If you saw any of your clients.
Dupe.
Oh, you just gave me an idea for a new intro to this.
There we go. Recut that for season 3.
But if you saw in any of your clients any raises or falling in rankings or anything.
So I'm just going to put out a giant PSA. And if you've seen my commentary on the SEO Twitter in the last couple of days, sometimes there's a subset of SEOs that are very on top of the algorithm updates, and there's a subset of SEOs that get into a tizzy around the algorithm updates. And it's almost like I immediately think of the movie Twister. And algorithm kind of like storm chasers and followers, and just trying not to get squished or crushed by the tornado that is the algorithm. What I'll say is I'm not one of those people, and it's not that I don't care about algorithm updates. It's that I feel like, and I've only worked on one client ever where we were significantly downgraded and then eventually upgraded again with a flip of the switch from an algorithm update, where I knew that was the case. And I will say the thing that I would recommend when these types of things happen, right, is to certainly keep your ear to the ground and watch performance and mark down when big algorithm updates happen so that you can correlate it. But I'll say for my clients and clients that I've worked with in the past, the reason it's not a problem is because their problems are way more basic than an algorithm update. And the problems that they had the day before the algorithm update are the same problems that they have after the algorithm update. And Google can decide whether or not to treat them a little bit differently, a little bit better, a little bit worse. But the same problem exists that, hey, their sites are slow or their sites are technically unfriendly, and we're still trying to fix that. It's not like we're going to change what we're doing after the algorithm update, because those are things we were already trying to fix. Or, hey, they need more content or they need better content. Well, guess what? That was what we were trying to fix anyways, usually. So it's not necessarily like we just have to take our playbook and take our strategy and throw it out the window. I would not advise that. You create a strategy for a reason, and maybe this is a bump in the road, and maybe this algorithm update, especially if it affects you naturally, is a signal that maybe you need to dive deeper into a specific area or a thing that you're doing. Because sometimes algorithm updates that impact brands negatively, it's because they were doing something wrong that they shouldn't have been doing. So maybe you should stop doing that thing. But for the most part, if you're doing SEO the right way, your strategy is the same the day after the algo update as it was the day before. And there's probably not a lot that you can or should change. So that's my advice.
And with all my other clients, everyone was even, right? We didn't. If Google didn't announce it, and I wouldn't even notice there was an update on most of my clients. You look at things like Mozcast, I think it's Mozcast and Algoroo. We definitely see there is a big shift in the algorithm. Those are algorithm trackers. They take a whole bunch of keywords and see where things are moving. And we did see even SEM Russia sensor. We do see a lot of that stuff moving, but. Yeah, they're tracking the whole internet. And when we look down subsections of the internet, I think, as I was saying, maybe I don't have any fintech clients, but we definitely see some sections move. Like I said, that fast food client I have they definitely saw some gigantic boost. Can't say it was from that update, though, but it happened right around the same time. But I do love your analogy to the movie Twister, because as soon as you said that, one of my favorite parts in that is when you're explaining what an F1 tornado is, an F2, and then I forget it was Helen Hunt or one of the
that's right, it's Helen Hunt.
It's what about an F5? And everybody's spoon drops because they're eating breakfast. And the main character,
F5s.
That's the finger of God. It just made me just think of that every time someone brings up Twister, of how ridiculous that scene was. But
so, Martha, I don't know. What are your thoughts about this?
So yesterday, one of our clients noticed like a change in one of the featured snippets around movie times, like that Google was like actually scraping additional information off sites and sort of like making more inferences on like where they think they should send people. So it's like a really small kind of niche space, but it was a change that we saw happen after yesterday. And then the rest is like a bit early. So as we sort of continue to do testing and look, like we'll see sort of if we see anything significant, but usually it takes us, a week or two before we start seeing like anything that we can call a trend. And I sort of agree with you. Like if you're doing good SEO, good content, good structured data, all that stuff, like will continue to help you, continue to thrive with search engines, right? Like those fundamentals don't change. And so I think part of the message is like, if you see a change, during one of these algorithm changes, it's probably because like your house isn't clean, right? Like you need to kind of go back to and make sure that like that core stuff is working. And, I think that's, even in this client's case was sort of like the root cause of some of the changes that we saw.
Right. And Google always says like they do 400 updates a year.
They're releasing stuff all the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it is visual on the page and schema has a lot to do with that, right? So any like featured snippet, how-to snippets, FAQs, all these different types of
exactly. And we'll see changes, right? Well,
exactly.
Yeah.
I saw something. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, like, I always like go back to like how Google makes money, right? Like whenever I see algo changes or anything else, it's like, okay, so Google's still trying to get people to stay on their search engine pages longer so that they can show more ads and make more money. And so, part of it is like, if you can give additional information so that like the searchers are again, sort of, able to be inquisitive and spend more time and search through things, then, you're kind of giving Google the money they want and therefore will also get results. So I don't know, I always think about like, why are they doing this? And part of it's like, so they can make more money. The same reason why, feature snippets, FAQs and stuff are giving answers in search. Well, why? Because like, so they can spend more time there and then they can make more money. Right. So it's all sort of connected.
So I feel like that is a good segue to
Martha's rant.
Yeah, I feel like what you were talking about like the visual on-page stuff is a good segue into something Google has been testing with the desktop icons and the bolded ads that some might actually say make them they do make them stand out less, and it still like underscores to me like Google is a business and they're trying to get people to click on their ads. And like the crazy thing I think about that particular test that seems to be going on now, not just in mobile but on desktop, although I will say I have not yet seen it, and I'm in the US, which I believe that they're testing it in the US, is one of Google's internal mottos is don't be evil. And they tell us all the time, don't deceive your users. And then they also then proceed to make their ads blend in as much as possible, which kind of seems a little bit hypocritical on their part. And it kind of drives
a little evil, right?
Just a little bit evil. So it's like, what the heck, Google? Like, why in as an organic search person, like all of that stuff continues to play into click-through rates, available search volume, no-click searches, and it's impacting us greatly. Like I was just looking at a client who's seeing year-over-year drops in organic traffic, and one of the things that we're noticing when we're looking at on the non-brand side, I don't feel like I have as much control over what's going on the branded side, but on the non-brand side, we looked at kind of the big some of the bigger non-branded things that were driving traffic to their site both this year and last year. And one of the really interesting things that we found was like, well, they didn't really decline in ranking, but those same searches aren't getting less search volume, but they aren't getting fewer impressions. But they are getting fewer clicks year over year. And part of me wonders if it's because of stupid stuff like this that Google keeps doing. So Google, you're killing me, man.
Yeah, I think it's one of these really hard debates around how much do you structure and give away, right? versus control context and then control kind of pieces. And the reason I use that word is like, so long-term strategist Martha like believes that like how we're going to consume information is going to continue to fragment. So like we get it on our phone, we get it on our thermostat, we get it on our fridge, we get it on our, Apple Watch. So like all the ways we're consuming information is constantly changing, to where, my 4-year-old can ask Google questions and get it by voice so that he doesn't even have to know his spell, right? Or even ask it properly in English. Like he can get that answer that he needs. So one is like accepting that fragmentation is happening, and that like the ways that we interact with the content for whatever type of thing is totally changing. Would you guys agree with that? Like it's changing, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, even with social, like tons of stuff going on there.
Absolutely.
The thing that you're saying about your 4-year-old knowing how to do voice searches, my 4-year-old and 6-year-old, like they without me teaching them, figured out how to voice search on YouTube Kids, and it is really, really scary. But it also makes, and that's from a data privacy standpoint, but it also makes me really think of like the future, and if like they can do this at this age, the things that they're going to be able to do and come up with, but also some of the things that they might be lacking, like basic reading and spelling skills. So it's really interesting.
It's really interesting. Yeah. And so part of then like as the owners of that content, you have to decide like, do you want to show up in these different channels? And the answer is yes, but there's going to be a cost, right? And so, I feel like Europe's going to lead the charge here, where like you're going to be asked to license your content so that these different channels can use it. And I think like we'll start seeing that more. And so then the question is like, well, how do you actually make sure you're ready for these channels? And the answer is structured data. Like Google was really clear at Google I/O last May. They're like, our motivation for structured data is that you can basically optimize it with an open standard, i.e. schema.org, and then be found. And they use like across any moment and any surface. And their word surface was like where they had a picture of a car and a watch and a phone and a tablet, and they had, moments where like, the moment where you're asking what the weather is in the morning, or your child is asking to play some ridiculous song that they want to dance to in the kitchen. And so, it's sort of that idea that it's going to, that information is going to be relevant across the board. But that structured data is that standard language, and that Google, like in this statement at Google I/O, was saying like, and they'll take the burden to have you show up on those things if you use this open standard. And it's the first time they've like basically said the words like our motivation is for structured data. Like I've never heard that in my how many millions of years I've been talking about this stuff. And then John Mueller, like he's doing those like really fun short videos like in, I think it was October or November. He then also stated like for the first time publicly, Google, doing structured data isn't just about the rich results, right? They used to always say like, just do what our guidelines say. They're like, it also helps us with understanding. And so they've really broadened their message around structured data to say like, we need this to understand the context of the content and help us, and then the bird is really understanding the context of the sentence. And so like, to me, like since May last year, we've seen like tons of announcements around new features. We saw monthly schema.org releases between like March, April, May. Then we saw another one like in September, November. We saw like a ton of announcements in the fall around Search Console, like doing better reports. And then my favorites, like the rating changes, like and how they were trying to sort of, pull back sort of what they were going to show like rating and review rich snippets for. So we've really seen like 2019 be this like pretty strong message from Google. And to me, like some insight on that future state, I think that we're going to see this evolve into.
And one of the issues I have with Schema, like I 100% love it. I think it's actually like, if I was Google, I totally get why I'd push everyone to that, because there's, as an ex-developer, there are some really bad websites out there. Some of them probably when I used to do development 15 years ago are still living. And it's really hard for them to digest all that information and know the differences between stuff. So having some sort of structure to your data, I think of websites these days as like a data feed, mostly because I'm an SEO and I'm trying to give that data feed.
Totally, I agree.
But in general, like build a website around your data feed is what I kind of look at it. But I guess the issue I have with schema.org is sometimes I'll have like these rare cases. Like I know with e-commerce what I probably should mark up, or with certain types of organizations, but I'll have like schema.org is very vague on some of the, like how to implement some of this. They're very, like, they don't, only the most popular ones they have examples for. There's a lot of schema they have that they don't have examples, or they'll have like, here's like 500 things you can stick in this, one vocabulary or something inside a schema, but they only tell us like, here's the name and description.
Yeah, like where's the how-to guide, right?
There's not great documentation. So I find myself trying to go to GitHub, try to read some of the commits and things like that to the schema. But in general, I find myself not implementing schema in some cases, or just doing a real basic, here's a basic organization schema, because I know I could put 500 things in there. One, is Google going to read it and understand it? And two, I don't even know what to put on some of this stuff.
Yeah, so where there's mystery, there's margin. So you just explained why I have a business, Jeff.
Okay, awesome.
So yes, it is complicated. And actually one of the things we're going to really try to do this year is we'll be doing like webinars and more documentation sort of to solve that exact problem that you've talked about. So today we're doing a webinar on health schema markup. So there's like a whole health vocabulary, like how can you use that? How does that tie to the rich results? How's that tie to understanding? And then we're going to start actually doing like just a lot more training. Like one of our values and passions is like training the market. We have a ton of content out today, but we're going to get even deeper into it because everything, like the schema.org vocabulary is a semantic ontology. So like we're actually also going to publish a paper on like, how do you really understand this whole knowledge graph ontology thing? And how do we like explain it in sort of real words? We have a paper that's coming out later this month specifically on that. Because the reason they wrote it that way is because a bunch of semantic ontologists wrote it, because that's how the machines are understanding it. So like I always joke that like schema.org is written like a dictionary in a foreign language, no matter what language you're speaking, because it's like so hard to understand and read. Yeah. And part of it is if you can understand the idea that you're identifying a thing and then defining like things about it with the properties and then its relationships to other things, you can start kind of seeing how everything is just like helping things be connected, which is then how Google like does the understanding and sort of inferencing between information. But if you don't spend the time to actually learn not just what the Google features are, but like how does this whole, like what is semantic technology and how does it work? And why is this like the basis for how we're doing search? So we have this kind of boot camp, and I'm happy to actually to share it with everyone. We used to give it to our clients, and now we just have it on our website that basically walks you through explaining like that fundamental piece that's sort of missing from all Google's training. And so I'm happy to share that with the community and sort of help people learn and kind of get that fundamental shift that will perhaps, Jeff, help. We're sort of like that bridging the gaps with them. Like, okay, now I'm trying to optimize a medical procedure page. Like, how do I go about using the vocabulary and understanding how to use that properly?
Right. And usually when I search for those rare instances, I find an article from Schema App. So
yeah. And if you don't, let us know. Cause like, for us, like, the complex, not common, complicated technology-wise websites are our favorites, right? Like that's sort of, what we're sort of specifically built and have the expertise and knowledge to do. Like we do schema markup every day, all day. And so like we're seeing this stuff and thinking about it all the time. So we're happy to be a resource. Yep.
So one of the things I think Jeff's right, not just with documentation of implementation, I also think with respect to what the benefit is. So I feel like if it's not a popular type of schema, i.e. one that triggers a rich result in Google, it's very hard on our side to justify or to know when is enough and how do we prove to a client or to an internal team that this is really, really important to implement, because as we talked about before, like our greatest challenge really is getting people to implement things. And in order to do that, many times we have to make a business case. Well, if we're trying to make a business case to implement a particular piece of structured data that doesn't end up in a rich result because there's just not, now it's getting better, but there's just not a whole lot of reporting around in things like even Google Search Console. The reporting is still very basic. How do you go about helping people provide data in some of those gray areas when it comes to like proving that, yes, this is important, this is driving incremental value, this is helping you get into that place, even if it is an attribute or something that maybe you should mention this attribute? Like, how do you guys look at that?
Sure. So let's first talk about like what you should optimize and like how you prove the point, and then we'll talk about a bit about measurement. So what we usually do, because like, we have to kind of prove that every day, all day, right? Like they're not going to do business with us unless we can do it. So often if we only have like a limited scope, we're like, we're going to test it on something, we'll pick something that has a rich result, right? Or the other question we often ask is like, what is actually critical content on your site that you need to be found by your customers in order to help drive some business goal, right? So if it's a support organization, it might be all their like technical FAQs or questions and answers. If it's, a marketing team, it could be like their video content that they're building out. If it's, it really depends on like how they're measuring, like what's important for the business and how they're measuring that success. So the first thing is like be strategic about if you're only piloting or trying it on something, about sort of how it aligns to that. And then if you can get a rich result as part of that, bonus, like we always try to do, if we're doing a pilot or something, we're focused on the rich result. And then how we do measurement, like once we know that, what content we're looking at is, the measurement's no different than the measurement that they measure for success today. So if they measure impressions and clicks and bookings, or if they measure sales, or if it's appointments or leads, however they're measuring success, it could be even programmatic ads, that's how you're going to measure success after the schema markup. And we like tend to find like even with things that aren't driving a rich result, that we'll still see like an increase in impressions and clicks and conversion, because like the quality of the traffic tends to get better with that understanding. But again, like you still need someone who buys in that like, Google's using this for understanding. Google's using this as a standard to like be found on different surfaces. Like in the webinar today, we're going to talk a little bit about how when we did FAQ markup on like one page FAQ on each of the hospitals, that like we're seeing it impact their mobile numbers for like their top 3 keywords. And they haven't really done anything for mobile, like, in this time, like it was just like right after we did the FAQ markup. So here they're now like, it's one page, right? Like it's not even that big a deal, but we're actually seeing, because of the format, it like driving, way more performance on like their mobile platform. And so like, there's some things also like, as you start continue to measure the things that, the business is good at, then it's good. And so we use Search Console, and then we've actually we're just about to GA what we call our descriptive analytics, or like our new analytics piece, where we'll take GA Google Search Console data and then your Schema App data and release data, and be able to map it all together so that we can show, a really good sort of, piece to not sort of have to dig into all the analytics, but be able to show in a graphical sense, where those impacts are happening and where we release the schema markup. So it's much easier to show that value. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
That, and I'm going to produce tons of case studies, so you're going to have like way more stuff at your fingertips, so that you can sort of be like, well, when this tech firm did this, when this health firm did this, so you'll have some industry specific type of examples.
Yeah, and it's really, really helpful to have data to point to, because as we all know, like data trumps almost everything else.
Exactly.
Instinct, and it's incredibly important to get them use that as a way to get people to maybe move things up in the implementation queue. So anytime that you can put data behind something that you're doing, whether it's schema or something else, that's incredibly important. So I want to be mindful of time. I did have one last question, and it's about something that, in looking at your website, that I find incredibly interesting. And it's this idea, like I said, there's a lot of gray area, and there's a lot of like, how much is too much. But you mentioned something about future proof with voice, with screens everywhere, chatbots, AI. augmented and virtual reality. And I just I wanted to ask about your perspective with respect to how do you feel like schema and structured data serves to kind of feed those beasts, so to speak, because those technologies are, like you said, increasing, and I don't see that increase in, or that the prominence of those types of mediums decreasing anytime soon.
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple stories maybe to help kind of set the stage. So I was talking to one of the big chatbot companies in the world, and was asking them if they use structured data or if they use like a knowledge graph or anything to answer questions. And they're like, well, we're really like a workflow kind of chatbot, but we just bought this AI chatbot company. You should talk to them. And so I talked to their MIT grads AI chatbot company, and I was like, oh, are you guys, using structured data or a knowledge graph? And they're like, absolutely, we're building a knowledge graph and ontology, because that helps us then understand like natural language and relationships between things. And so it was the first confirmation, and this was like a year and a bit ago now, where like the chatbot companies are trying to model information and relationships and information just like we're doing for search. But what's interesting is that they haven't quite clued in that like we're doing this for search already. And a chatbot is really just like helping you find answers, right? The same way that it's providing, service or trying to connect you with things, just like a search engine is doing. So, to me, a chatbot is just like another means of a search engine. And we've gotten confirmation from some of the sort of, let's say, lead thinkers that, they're using the same semantic technology in order to do this type of work. And I think the other piece is just that, when I was sitting down with Guha, who's the creator of Schema.org at Google a couple of years ago, like one of his funny questions he asked us at the end of lunch was like, do you think websites will be around in 5 years? And I like started laughing, because this is a debate that my co-founder Mark and I have like all the time. And I was like, no, like, why do we need an interface? Like, I'm going to choose like where I want to see that information and how I want to see that information. So it might be on a computer and through a browser. It might be like with a ticker tape going across my screen. It might be in, a Kindle book or a, book fashion. But Mark's response, and he's like more the data architect, data scientist, and so he's like, well, there still needs to be a container for the data, and so that like a website will still like act as that container. But I thought it was a funny question for him to ask us, only because like we debate that, in that how fragmented will this become, and how will sort of our consumption of it evolve over time. So I guess like when saying those things is like, I do believe like we'll need to start, I always use the word like manage our brand for machines, thinking of these different consumers, and, whether you want to do that now or do that later, whether it's going to be like in a large enterprise, IT is thinking about like, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this for our chatbot initiative, or the search team's trying to think about how we do it for search. To me, it's all the same thing. It's like, how do you have this type of structured information with context, defining relationships, so that it can answer questions or provide service through whatever means it is. And nothing has sort of veered off that course, I'll say, today over the last couple of years. And so like I see us sort of continue to head in that direction.
Yeah, I'm always looking at like what else would be using schema, or I guess structured data in general. Like I'm thinking, calendars and things like that can just, some of the basic stuff, like, not even advanced like chatbots, but just be able to like
basic stuff. Yeah.
Basic stuff. Yeah.
And some of it, they're just like unaware that there's a standard out there. So like we spend just a lot of time being like, do you know there's a standard? Like you should have a standard. And, we've joked about building a chatbot like based on structured data, because we're just like, oh my goodness, that's like, it's not hard to do. We should just do that. Maybe we'll do that this year. We'll see. But it's, to me, it's sort of a no-brainer. And, especially if we can get Google to drive even broader adoption, like that's what will be key. But it is a de facto standard. And so that I think will play for how it can then be reused. And you can reuse, we didn't even get into like in analytics, you can reuse Schema Markup like in analytics to structure your analytics, which is like what we do through one of our offerings called, Semantic Analytics or Enhanced Analytics. There's lots of ways that you can reuse that structure to add value to the company. And what I would say, like we've been talking about it for a couple of years. Our customers are now just kind of getting to that aha.
It's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for our time or for your time, but we'd like to end every episode by getting some advice for upcoming SEOs or SEOs that might not necessarily know much about Schema. So like what kind of advice would you give someone who's either new to SEO or just new to Schema and want to learn, and where should we start and things like that?
So we have a 5-day free email course on our website that sort of like walks you through like those basics and so forth. So if you just go to www.schemaapp.com, it's on the bottom right corner, and you'll find that. My email address is on that. So I ask you questions at the end, like respond, because I actually read those and respond to them. Awesome. And my question is often like, what are you going to try to do with Schema? And my intention then is to be able to point you to other resources we have on the page so you can continue learning. And so just like we have a whole section of our website now called resources. It has training in there. It has webinars that kind of touch on key pieces. It has how to like tech tips, and all that's for free. Like there's videos on how to do it. Sometimes we show like how to do it within our tools, but the intention there is like to really teach you how to get going. And then my other advice is just like ask people, like start the conversation. And I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was like some of the women in tech SEO groups I'm in and so forth, but they're like, just have the guts to like reach out to the JP Sherman or to reach out to me or to yourselves and ask those questions, because in the end, we're all human and we all want to connect, and we all were there once. And so if there's something that I think I said earlier, like if you are trying to learn something and it's not on our website, let us know, or tweet at Schema App tool, and we'll sort of respond to you, or we'll build that content and sort of get that out.
And Martha, where else can people find you?
I mostly hang out on Twitter, so I'm Martha Van Berkel on Twitter. You can also add me on LinkedIn. If you add me on LinkedIn, like send me a message with your ad so I like know why you want to connect. And then you can find me at martha@schemaapp.com. So I'm happy to again be a resource, answer questions, and point people in the right direction.
Awesome. And just again, Martha's company and website is schemaapp.com. So if you're listening, go visit the website, sign up for her free 5-day Schema Markup email course. Hugely beneficial if you're trying to get Schema implemented. Go follow her on Twitter, maybe on LinkedIn, although that can sometimes get a little weird. But yeah, go follow her. Go check out schemaapp.com. And again, Martha, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and having what I thought was an awesome conversation.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Page 2 podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the show or listen to more episodes, visit us at page2podcast.fm. That's page, 2, podcast.fm. Our episodes are also available on a number of other platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Deezer, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, TuneIn, and more. Additionally, you can also listen to our show on our new YouTube channel. If you'd like to become a sponsor or would like to be interviewed, get in touch with us at thepage2podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, happy optimizing.